Unfortunately, the pandemic has slightly slewed things, in as much as it's hard to spend as much time with the Queen.
For years, the royal family has battled rumors of financial secrecy, but this latest revelation threatens to shake the monarchy to its core. When Prince Edward's wife, Duchess Sophie, came forward with shocking proof of stolen royal funds, the palace walls trembled. Her explosive claims didn't just expose hidden transactions, they pointed fingers where no one expected. Now, whispers grow louder as Princess Beatrice's husband becomes entangled in the scandal. So, could this be the biggest royal financial betrayal yet? The truth is darker than imagined. The shocking discovery that rocked the palace. In autumn 2025, London's chill mirrored the tension brewing within Buckingham Palace. Amid gilded halls and centuries of royal legacy, a quiet storm threatened the monarchy. Duchess Sophie, poised and composed after years in the public eye, walked the palace's east wing to the dim royal finance office. There, surrounded by ledgers and screens, she faced a duty far removed from ceremonies, confronting the hidden turmoil quietly gathering behind polished doors. The task was simple, or so she thought: a quiet audit of Queen Elizabeth II's private estate funds, an account layered with centuries of royal trust and tradition. Sophie had performed such reviews before, orderly, predictable, the kind of work that never made headlines. Yet something in the air felt different that morning, as though the very walls were holding their breath. She took her seat at a long oak desk, the faint hum of computers filling the silence. Rows of glowing spreadsheets reflected in her sharp blue eyes as she traced columns of figures with a practiced hand. Everything was in order. Until it wasn't. There it was, a name that shouldn't have been there. Imapelli Mozzi Limited, Sophie froze. The name tugged at her memory instantly. Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, the polished property developer who had married Princess Beatrice, one of the family's own. The figure beside it was staggering. A transfer worth millions, moved quietly just months earlier. No royal authorization, no accounting notes, no explanation. Her pulse quickened. In the world of royal finance, where every pound was tied to history, such a transaction wasn't just suspicious. It was dangerous. It hinted at something deeper, something intentionally hidden. She leaned closer, her breath fogging slightly on the screen. Could it be an error? A misfiled entry? Or was she staring at the first thread of a carefully woven deceit? A distant clock chimed. Outside, London's fog thickened, wrapping the palace in a ghostly stillness. Sophie rose and shut the door, her instincts sharpening. Years in royal circles had taught her that the quietest scandals were often the deadliest. When she called in Henry Grayson, her trusted financial advisor, his reaction only deepened the unease. The man looked pale, his eyes darting toward the door before he spoke. "There are orders from the top, Your Royal Highness," he murmured. "Orders?" Sophie pressed. "From whom?" Henry hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Best not to ask too many questions. Some accounts are meant to stay closed." That single sentence sent a chill down Sophie's spine, colder than the fog outside. Rumors had already been circling about Queen Camilla's financial restructurings, subtle shifts in the way royal assets were being managed since the king's health began to waver. Some said it was modernization. Others whispered of power being quietly redistributed. But this was different. This was personal. Sophie knew what such discoveries could mean. A misplaced accusation could ruin reputations, but ignoring it could destroy the monarchy's already fragile trust. Later that evening, as she looked out from her private quarters over the palace gardens, the weight of her discovery settled heavily on her shoulders. The leaves rustled in the wind like pages turning in an unseen book. Somewhere below, a black car pulled away from the palace gates, headlights slicing through the mist. Inside her chest, her heart thudded with quiet resolve. If corruption had found its way into the royal bloodline, she would uncover it, no matter whose name was on that transfer. She turned back to her desk, her reflection merging with the cold light of the computer screen. "This ink stain will not fade unnoticed," she vowed silently. And as the clock struck midnight in Buckingham Palace, the echoes of that vow seemed to travel down every gilded corridor, a promise that beneath the crown's polished surface, the truth was about to awaken. As Sophie investigated the anomaly further, what did she discover? How did the innocent young royals feel about the culprit's vibes and business vision for the royal family? Let's find out. The shadowy investigation unfolds. As autumn painted the trees outside Clarence's house in blazing shades of gold and orange, the air itself seemed to hum with tension. Inside, Sophie moved like a woman driven by a quiet storm. Her desk was buried under spreadsheets, memos, and fragments of evidence only she seemed to notice. Every number told a story, and the stories weren't adding up. The weekly finance meetings had once been routine. Polished reports, polite smiles, and murmured approvals. But lately, they had become her battleground. At the head of the gleaming oak table sat Edoardo, handsome, confident, and always one step ahead. At 42, the Italian-born property mogul had the effortless charm of someone used to winning. His suits were tailored, his hair slicked back with surgical precision, and his eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, never stopped calculating. He dazzled the room with smooth presentations about strategic modernization. Every slide glowed with promises, bold European expansions, revitalized royal assets, glittering profit projections. Younger royals nodded eagerly, thrilled by his energy and his promise to make the monarchy fit for the future. They saw a visionary. Sophie saw danger. Seated quietly at the far end, her high-necked navy dress immaculate, she watched, took notes, and waited. Numbers were her language, and they whispered secrets no one else could hear. A £2.7 million claim that only showed £1.9 million in the books. A sudden payment to a consulting firm linked to Edoardo's own Banda property group. Subtle, clever, almost invisible, until she noticed the pattern. Her hand barely trembled as she circled the discrepancies in red. By the time the meeting ended, she already knew what her next move would be. That night, in the quiet of her Kensington study, she composed a string of emails to the royal auditors, calm, precise, and devastating. She knew what would follow. Within days, the counterattack began. Edoardo's tone shifted from polite to poisonous. He removed her from group chats, accidentally left her out of key briefings, and whispered to others that she was stuck in old ways. Yet Sophie endured, her silence a shield. Every attempt to isolate her only deepened her resolve. Then came the envelope. It arrived one rainy morning, slipped under her study door. No stamp, no sender, just her name in block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper. If you knew where the money really went, you'd never sleep again. Her breath caught. Beneath the note were photocopied invoices, grainy but clear enough to read. An €850,000 transfer to an offshore account. Signed, EMM Edoardo M. Mapelli. Sophie's heart pounded. She locked the door, spread the papers across her desk, and began matching signatures, one by one. The storm outside battered the windows, and she barely noticed. By dawn, she was certain. The money trail was real. The atmosphere inside Clarence's house shifted. Whispers followed her down hallways. Beatrice, once warm, now seemed distant, defensive, her eyes clouded with guilt or fear. Was she protecting her husband or herself? Sir Reginald, the palace advisor, dodged her questions with diplomatic grace, but his unease betrayed him. The walls were closing in. A week later, a second envelope appeared, this time containing a small USB drive. Her hand shook as she plugged it in. Static, then a voice. Eduardo's, calm, smug, discussing off-book deals, shell accounts, and redirected funds. The voice was unmistakable. But who had sent it? Sophie's reflection glimmered in the dark laptop screen. Eyes hard, jaw set. There was no going back now. She understood what was at stake. For Eduardo, the crown was just a pawn in a larger game, a way to launder money, to build power, to own what could never truly be his. And for her, it was more than loyalty. It was justice. Each corridor now felt like a maze of secrets, each meeting a test of courage. The palace air grew colder, heavier, as though the very walls had learned to listen. And through it all, Sophie walked steady, her every step echoing with purpose. The storm outside had reached its peak, but the real tempest was still to come. How did Sophie confront the culprit? Was he able to address her concerns, or did he defensively reject the claims? Let's delve into the details of the confrontation that sparked heated reaction. The tense confrontation ignites. The wind howled off the Thames that afternoon, rattling the ancient windows of Royal Lodge as if warning that something momentous was coming. Sophie drove through the tall iron gates in her sleek black Range Rover, her camel coat sweeping behind her like a cloak of resolve. She hadn't called ahead. She wanted this to be a shock, a confrontation that would peel back the polished royal facade and reveal what she already knew. Inside the private tea room, the scent of bergamot and tension mixed in the air. Beatrice sat by the fireplace, her usual warmth replaced by suspicion. Eduardo lounged beside her, outwardly calm but with a flicker of unease, behind his charming smile. When Sophie entered, no one offered tea. She didn't sit. She placed a leather folder on the table and said quietly, "You need to see this." For a long moment, no one spoke. The crackling fire filled the silence. Then Sophie began, her tone measured, her words cutting through the room like glass. Bank transfers, company links, missing funds, audio recordings. Each detail landed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Beatrice's composure shattered first. Her face flushed crimson. Her flame-red hair framed her fury like a burning halo. "This is absurd!" she cried, standing so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You've always resented him, our happiness, his modern vision. You think the Wessexes are the only ones who understand integrity?" Her voice trembled with rage, but beneath it lay fear. Eduardo's mask of charm began to slip. His eyes darted toward the folder, then away again. "You misunderstand the figures," he said smoothly, though his tone betrayed him. "Every transfer was authorized. Investments, not theft." But Sophie didn't flinch. Calm, steady, almost cold, she opened the folder and drew out a small recorder. She pressed play. Eduardo's voice filled the room. Calm, deliberate, unmistakable. "Keep it under the radar. The board won't question royal funding." The words hung like smoke in the air. Beatrice froze, her fury evaporating into disbelief. Her husband's voice, so familiar, so trusted, now sounded like a stranger's confession. Her eyes darted to him, searching for denial, for something that could undo what she'd heard. He offered none. Hours later, in their grand apartment at St. James's Palace, Beatrice wandered aimlessly, the opulence around her suddenly feeling hollow. The ticking of a clock grew unbearable. She reached for something, anything to steady her mind. In tidying his desk, her fingers brushed an envelope tucked beneath a ledger. She paused. The royal seal. Her stomach knotted. Inside were contracts, official, stamped, and bearing Eduardo's bold signature. The documents named his private company as sole beneficiary to a series of royal redevelopment projects, millions redirected under the guise of modernization. Her heart sank. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a betrayal. Of her, of the crown, of everything their family name was meant to protect. When Eduardo returned later, he carried his usual air of confidence, softening his tone as though words could mend what greed had broken. "These are necessary risks, Bea," he said gently, taking her hand. "I'm securing our future for us." But his touch felt foreign now. Beatrice's gaze drifted to the portraits on the wall, faces of ancestors who had endured scandal, exile, and sacrifice to preserve the family's honor. Their painted eyes seemed to stare back at her, asking what she would do next. That night, when the palace slept, Beatrice sat alone at her desk, barefoot, trembling not with fear but with the ache of betrayal. She turned on her laptop, copied every file she could find, and sealed them in an envelope. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, she penned a short note. "If you are right, protect this family, no matter what it costs." She sent it to Sophie before she could change her mind. By the time the sun rose over the Thames, an unexpected alliance had been born, not from loyalty or ambition, but from pain. And in the quiet corridors of the monarchy, the storm that Sophie had unleashed was only beginning to break. When, where, and how did Princess Sophie reveal the atrocities perpetrated by Princess Beatrice's husband? What was the reaction in the meeting? Let's dive into the details of the revelation. The heart-wrenching betrayal revealed. In the hidden council chamber of Buckingham Palace, a room of ancient oak, polished brass, and generations of guarded secrets, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. The meeting was not just another royal formality. It was Judgment Day, the end of pretenses and polished smiles. Sophie entered first, her face calm but her eyes sharp as glass. Behind her came Princess Beatrice, pale yet steady, and her husband, Eduardo, whose charm seemed thinner than ever under the weight of accusation. The long table glowed under the chandeliers, papers stacked neatly, yet every page felt heavy with unspoken truths. As the session began, a series of charts and documents lit up the projection before them. Diverted funds, offshore accounts, shell companies registered in obscure towns across Italy. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone had been quietly siphoning millions. The trail led undeniably to Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi. Eduardo leaned back, his elegant posture masking the panic underneath. Then, with a calm, too calculated to be genuine, he spoke. "This is absurd," he said, voice smooth but strained. "A deliberate smear to destroy my reforms and reputation. I have enemies, and they've found their way here." He met every stare with cold defiance, spinning words like silk. For a moment, some might have believed him. The royal outsider, wrongly accused, standing tall against hidden hands. But then, his arrogance flared. "I have done nothing wrong," he declared, pounding the table softly for emphasis. "This is beneath the dignity of this institution." The air tightened. Beatrice had remained silent throughout, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But inside, her heart thundered. She had spent sleepless nights replaying every inconsistency, every late call, every nervous glance. And when the final document arrived that morning, the one that carried the truth, she knew what she had to do. Slowly, she rose. The room fell silent. Her husband's confident expression faltered as their eyes met, hers filled with grief, his with growing fear. From a thin folder she drew a single contract, worn at the edges, but bearing the unmistakable royal seal. She placed it before him without a word. The council members leaned forward. Eduardo's eyes darted across the page. His signature, bold and irrefutable. Not a proxy. Silence descended like a shroud. The truth hung in the air, heavy, merciless, final. His face drained of color, the mask of charm and intellect shattered. This is a trick, he spat, voice trembling now. They've manipulated you, Beatrice. You know me better than this. His fist slammed the table. The echo rattled through the chamber. Sophie flinched. An aide gasped. The protocol evaporated. The council's calm formality gave way to disbelief and pity. Then, in a low, sorrowful tone, the elderly head of the council spoke. The Bank of Italy has confirmed the transfers, he said. Funds moved through subsidiaries into personal accounts, disguised as consulting fees. The evidence is conclusive. Eduardo's shoulders sagged. The weight of exposure crushed him where he stood. Pride, his lifelong armor, crumbled into dust. Beatrice did not move. Her tears fell silently, glistening under the golden lights. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, yet sharp as steel. "No one stains this house," she said. Every word carried the agony of a heart that had just broken itself to protect something greater. Eduardo looked at her one last time, the woman who had once trusted him completely, and saw no anger, only sorrow too deep for words. The guards approached quietly. His empire, his name, his place beside her, all gone. The council chamber returned to silence, as if the walls themselves mourned what they had witnessed. Love had been sacrificed on the altar of duty. A royal legacy was saved, but two souls were forever scarred. Could this leave Princess Beatrice's marriage with an unforgettable blow? Can she bear the betrayal from her husband? Let's dig into the details of their already fragile marriage. The quiet struggle of Princess Beatrice's marriage. Princess Beatrice's life once looked like a modern fairy tale. When she married Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi in the summer of 2020, the world saw a picture of love and quiet elegance. Their wedding was small and intimate story, a private ceremony held under the soft glow of the pandemic's restrictions. There were no crowds or flashing cameras, only close family, flowers, and vows whispered in a time when the world stood still. It seemed like a love story, written in calm defiance of chaos. Afterward, Beatrice and Eduardo appeared to settle into a blissful rhythm. Together, they welcomed two daughters, Sienna and Athena, and often looked like the perfect young family. Eduardo already had a son, Wolfie, from his previous relationship with architect Dara Huang, and by all accounts, Beatrice embraced him warmly. From the outside, their blended family seemed harmonious. But as time has revealed with many royal romances, not everything golden glitters forever. Recent whispers in royal circles suggest that Princess Beatrice and Eduardo's marriage may be showing signs of strain. The cracks were particularly noticeable at Royal Ascot 2025, where the couple, normally poised and warm, appeared distant and tense, their smiles faint and eyes rarely meeting. Insiders suggest deeper, long-standing tensions contribute to the strain. Before Beatrice, Eduardo had been engaged to Dara Huang, mother of his son, Wolfie, and they continued to co-parent amicably. While intended as a mature arrangement, this ongoing relationship reportedly created friction in his marriage to Beatrice. Sources indicate that Beatrice initially tried to remain calm, but gradually desired clearer boundaries, while Dara is said to have felt that her relationship with Eduardo might have persisted if not for Beatrice. These subtle, underlying dynamics have occasionally resurfaced, casting a quiet shadow over the couple's private life and public appearances. Yet beyond personal issues, there may also be royal pressures at play. When Prince William eventually becomes king, His cousins Beatrice and Eugenie are expected to take on greater royal responsibilities. Though neither currently holds the title of a working royal, experts like Majesty Magazine's Ingrid Seward believe that could soon change. When William ascends the throne, Seward explained, Beatrice and Eugenie will be valuable assets. It makes perfect sense for him to involve them. While this prediction might sound honorable, it could also reshape Beatrice and Eduardo's world entirely. Beatrice was born into royal life. She understands its endless protocols and public scrutiny. Eduardo, on the other hand, built his success in private enterprise. An independent man whose life once revolved around business, not palace schedules. Becoming the husband of a full-time working royal could demand adjustments he never imagined. The glare of cameras, the scrutiny of tabloids, and the expectation to smile even when the heart is heavy, all of it could prove overwhelming. If the couple is already facing emotional distance, the added burden of royal duty might widen that gap. Long trips, official events, and relentless attention often leave little room for intimacy. History has shown that even the most loving relationships can bend under the royal spotlight. Prince Harry and Meghan's experience stands as a vivid example of how quickly fairy tales can turn into emotional battles. For Beatrice and Eduardo, the challenge is clear: balancing love, duty, and individuality in a world where every gesture becomes a headline. Their marriage began as a quiet promise amid global silence. Two souls choosing love when everything else was uncertain. Now, years later, the silence around them feels heavier, more questioning. Only time will tell whether their story will rediscover its spark or fade into the long list of royal romances that lost their magic under the weight of expectation. For now, the once picture-perfect couple walks a delicate line between royal obligation and personal happiness, a reminder that even in castles, hearts can ache just like anyone else's. What lessons has the royal family learnt from the betrayal scandal? Will the marriage survive the heat of the betrayal? Can Eduardo get any protection? Let's find out. The dramatic aftermath and lasting legacy. As scandal's venom silently oozed through the polished marble halls of the palace, its consequences were both swift and unforgiving. There were no sensational headlines splashed across tabloids, no public shouting, only a quiet, merciless erasure. Eduardo, once admired and celebrated, found himself stripped of everything that had defined him. Titles, privileges, roles, access to the highest echelons of society, all vanished overnight. In the blink of an eye, he became a ghost in the world that had once lavished him with praise and attention. The law followed, unyielding and impartial. Charges of embezzlement and fraud were laid bare. No royal favor could shield him, not even a whisper of influence or prestige. Even a clinical trial, once a testament to his ambition and social sway, offered no protection. The Crown's message was stark and unmistakable. In the eyes of the law, no one was above accountability. Convicted and disgraced, Eduardo disappeared from the tailored Savile Row suites and the glossy society pages, transformed into a cautionary tale, a monument to unchecked greed. Beatrice, left in the ruins of love and trust, made a choice both heart-wrenching and profoundly noble. With her own heart in tatters, she stepped away from the glittering obligations and public life of royalty. To shield her child from the stain of scandal, she retreated to the quiet of a remote farmstead, where palace grandeur gave way to the hum of green fields, the honest rhythm of work, and the solitude that allowed reflection and healing. Her self-sacrifice whispered of a deeper, rarer form of princess duty, one that restored honor, not through triumph, but through enduring personal loss. Every choice she made was a silent prayer, a deliberate cleansing of the monarchy's dignity through her own suffering. In the aftermath, Sophie emerged like a force of resolve, her reputation unblemished vindicated by meticulous evidence that left no doubt of the truth. Her role evolved far beyond the title of Edward's wife. She became the Duchess of Discipline and Honor, a figure whose very presence demanded transparency. No longer would whispers of overreach or overzealousness tarnish her influence. Every council meeting, every decision carried her firm, uncompromising mark of integrity. Dawn filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, gilding her desk with light. Files lay pristine, scandal's residue washed away, replaced by a landscape of accountability and unshakable order. Eyes closed, Sophie reflected on the journey, the sacrifices made, the battles fought quietly in the shadows. Every signature she pressed, every mandate she enacted, was a testament to her commitment to protect the crown, to uphold truth, and to ensure that vigilance would never waver. Yet perhaps the most defining moment, the one that would resonate through history, came when Princess Beatrice placed the contract bearing her husband's own signature on the closed council table. The act was a razor-edged combination of courage and merciless self-denial. She faced a room thick with tension, met the stunned eyes of her husband, and the silent, scrutinizing gaze of the royal family. By choosing truth over love, duty over personal happiness, she shattered the life she had once believed was unbreakable. She sacrificed the illusion of perfect love, the shared dreams of a future together, and the warmth of her own heart, all to preserve the integrity of the monarchy. In doing so, she carried a burden heavier than any crown, proving that heroism is often measured not in accolades, but in the quiet, excruciating choices made in the service of something far greater than oneself. In the end, her decision echoed through the palace like a silent vow. Duty above all, integrity above attachment, and courage in the face of unbearable loss. She had defended the crown not with grand gestures or public speeches, but through the steady, unwavering power of truth, leaving behind a legacy of honor that would outlast even the sharpest pangs of personal sorrow. So, what do you think about the possible effects of the scandal on Princess Beatrice's marriage? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.